Hello again. We have come back yet again. I'm Jen
From the
Berzelli
swamp.
from the swamp.
I'm Kyle Godby, and these are our field notes from the swamp.
From the swamp.
What we've learned from the swamp.
Okay, where are we starting today, Kyle?
We're starting on from our Miro board here. You had asked me in a conversation off our recording here if I am a people collector. So I'd love for you to first expand on that question a little bit,
Yeah.
and then let's dive in. And I think that me thinking about that brought a broader question that I'd like to first I'll answer, but then I'd like to kind of like blow us up, and I think that'll create a really rich discussion.
Absolutely. Yes. So and the question kind of brings along with it. It's not really one question. It's like 10 questions in a trench coat together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember why I even asked it. I don't remember what we were talking about or like what triggered it. But when I said, "Are you a people collector?" I don't mean, are you a person who is trying to meet and be connected to so many people as a point of pride or vanity, to be able to name drop all the
Mm-hmm.
connections that you have, or to say, oh, I know that guy? Because I think anybody who's probably listening to this knows that's really not how either of us operate. So it's
Yeah.
not lobbed as a sort of insult. It really truly is. Something you had said at some point made me think about the notion that there are some people for whom surrounding themselves with or connecting to lots of people is in itself a motivation for
An
many
obsession
different
with
reasons
audience
that we
sizes.
can talk about. But
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of just curious how you would even receive the question, let alone how you
Yeah.
might answer it. So take it away.
Um, yeah, and my knee jerk was like no, and then that was to be like just to drop it, and then but I've kind of learned over the years. Let me contemplate on that for a little bit, because I always identify as the kind of person in those quizzes, like I have like very small friend groups that persist for long periods of time that are more intimate, where we're able to like uh have the sort of like the critical banter a lot, but I don't have the sort of larger group where we talk about the weather and shit like that. That's, to me, that's agonizing. So the idea of being a people collector was like, no, it's absurd. However, um, in a sort of leadership role, um, or in a role where, I think what came up for me was we've talked about the sort of I go to Dionysus because I'm sick of hearing about Prometheus, and Dionysus was the other one that stole the gift from the gods that doesn't get as much attention, mostly because it's also like debauchery and all of that sort of stuff. But why not? And I like my black metal, so let's go to Dionysus. So so uh, I had this Dionysian moment of discovering a lot of this stuff, and I think that's relatable to a lot of people that do the same. We've criticized no one in particular, but not necessarily criticized, but we've identified that out there. People grab onto that and immediately say, like, I've got this new tool, I've got this weapon, I can now run with it, and I can not necessarily use this with the best intentions. I'm just emboldened by this power, and power has possibly corrupted. I'm sensitive to that, partially because now when I discover this sort of thing, and in Dionysus's case, I'm brewing wine. I want to like bring everyone to the table and serve wine. I'm not like I have the wine. I'm going to sell it for incredible money because I've created scarcity and shielded knowledge and that sort of thing. But like, it's time to serve wine. Let's party. So in that sense, that to say people collector is, I think, fair. And if that was a thing that you sort of sensed floating out there, absolutely. And uh, I don't, uh, I don't know. That's probably a good. That's probably the right metaphor for it. Is I found that this unlocks a lot of things, and I think what was most apparent for me was when I was in Capital One and I was talking about this, And I was talking about what the work I was passionate about. I was talking about how interesting this was, but I was also talking about how it was allowing me to explore neurodivergence as an adult, learning that I was neurodivergent for the very first time over 40. And there were so many people that clicked onto that and came in and said, like, I've suspected, I don't know, but I don't know how to be a 40-year-old plus a middle-aged neurodivergent that is never, that grew up in a world that didn't acknowledge neurodivergence. And when I was able to say, this is like the sort of way that I've always seen the world, and now I have a language to express it, and I've got a validation I didn't have before, I saw a lot of people exhale in an interesting way and really like get very interested in this and run with it. And I kind of said, that's awesome to see that sort of thing happen. Now I want to do like the Scrooge on Christmas morning, running around throwing the coins, my other metaphor for serving wine. So yes, in that sense. But the larger question that brought me to was, why are we doing this? You and I spend a lot of time connecting with people one-on-one, doing talks, writing presentations, coaching folks, getting involved in communities of practice, supporting community of practice. This event that we do, this non-podcast here, we invest a good amount of time and energy and interest, and it's fulfilling. But why? What's the ROI for you?
Well, I want to answer that, but I also have like 18 other threads I want to pull on what you said.
Okay, run with it.
So I'm really curious. So we will come to like the ROI, both for me and for like the bigger question about why does
an ROI is such a terrible way to put it.
I like to use it though.
Yeah, I just destroyed everything I said in the last 5 minutes.
What's our North Star metric?
Right. What's your mission statement? Yeah.
Okay, but part of what I think I probably was asking or sensing when I asked that question was also, I'm sure some of our community has picked up too, the people who interact with both of us. I think compared to like the average, you and I are both, definitely sensitive to inclusion and creating a sort of welcoming, open, free, maybe we could go so far as to say aspirationally sort of liberatory kind of space for people.
Yep.
So I think you and I are already like left of average on that, in the sense that we both care deeply about that. But I think between the two of us, I sense that you are more sensitive to inclusion than I am in some ways, which is weird to say because I'm not trying to prop up a straw man kind of like space between us. But, and we've talked around some of this previously, and that's probably part of why I asked, because part of what I'm curious about is like, what happens if not everyone's included? Or, for example, what about welcoming and inviting and wanting to Scrooge McDuck? I like McDuck better than just regular Scrooge. I like imagining literally Scrooge McDuck. But anyway, what about being like reformed Scrooge speaks to you? I'm not, and this is not therapy hour here. So this is more like, because these are themes that I think people who do this kind of work probably also identify with in some way or another. I'm really just curious about like okay, let me back it up too. Doing a shit job articulating myself here, but that's fine.
I'm following great.
Process over here. So I'm not used to doing this live on the fly as much. But I think there's something here that I hear that is like, there's a redemption arc, or there's a reformed version of Kyle that is not reformed like you're atoning for sin, but that you have like uncovered something or learned something, and now like, want to share it with the world, want to be like Scrooge on the day of Christmas where he's seen the light, want to invite others in. Some people could hear that as evangelizing or missionary work, for better and worse. Some people can experience that as the welcoming little league coach who creates a role for everyone, who you've said in the past is like your North Star motivation in a lot of ways, to be the little league coach that gives everyone a role and some meaning on the team, and there are a lot. So like there's there's probably, some just core internal drivers there. And the reason I'm intrigued by it is because I don't operate with that as my core motivator. And so I probably need to I owe the answer to the same question, which we'll come back to. But what I'm trying to hear more about is to flip it around. Like, what is the downside if you aren't doing it as well as you hope to, or if you, for whatever reason, would find yourself unable to, or hampered in your efforts to create, is it that there's safety in numbers? Is it that we want to have as many diverse perspectives as possible? Is it that we want to create the relation and the welcoming in the relational sense, rather than necessarily the perspectives creating? So I guess I don't know if that even makes any sense at all, but like
it
what I'm
does.
trying to ask for, I don't have words for. So maybe just say
So
some words.
two things come up. Yesterday I was invited to help the team that hosted the first warm data lab here in Richmond, and it was amazing the way it came together. And it started with actually a little bit of drama. There was somebody within the community related to one of the hosts that had become a sort of troublemaker and had a history with some people, and they showed up and disrupted the scene and had to be removed. And that doesn't sound like a warm data squishy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm driving home and I'm thinking about all are welcome here deserves a sort of a paradox of tolerance asterisk on it.
Pearl Popper stuff going on, yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, the only way that this doesn't work is if that tension gets broken, that all are welcome here. Now, the truth is, like, from my own position, there's an ignorance there that means that I need to my role in being inclusive is more listening and responding and reacting, but more listening than it is driving. Then so and I get that. So it's going to be a series of getting it wrong at some point. There are going to be misses there because I will take action and find out through that action that you should have been listening when you were speaking, or you should have been handing the reins to someone else when you were doing, and it didn't occur to me until afterwards. So my expectation is the ball will be dropped in the future. That's not enough to keep me from continue doing the work, because I want to trip and fall over those things and hopefully have people around that can call that sort of thing out. And hopefully I've earned enough grace with those people that they're educating me rather than exiling me for that sort of thing. And hopefully I'm including enough people in that sort of design process where I don't have that degree of power where I can actually ruin something enough, but I'm just learning through the process. So I think that's the only risk I've really identified. There's not like can I not bring enough people to this, because there's not enough. There's not like a number in mind. There's not a goal of what this is. I think it just needs to be enacted. It just needs to be sort of habitualized for me as as space making just needs to be habitualized is really it. The ability to say, I think you're onto something. And this is like, it is habitual. I did this with music my whole life. In middle school, I'm going, you like that band? You'll like this band. Now I'm saying, you're doing this kind of work. You're interested in this. You should talk to this person. You should connect to this. You should come join us in this conversation. We're talking about that sort of stuff. I'm not able to really draw that distinction. And so it's sort of a second nature to me to be this connector. And it's the same way that I'm excited when I'm able to say, you might like this band, or somebody says to me, you might like this band, and I find it, yes, thank you for introducing me to them. I'm also just as thrilled when somebody introduces me to somebody or invites me to a new space. And yesterday I met a whole ton of people I've never met before, and I was in somebody else's territory the moment that I walked in, but it was immediately welcomed, and I became part of that immediately, and it was amazing. So it goes both ways. So I think that was your second question, sort of like what's the risk. Hopefully I answered that. The first part is the why. Like what was the redemption arc in there? And I don't know that it's so much a redemption arc, but my story of my story around my learning that I've been diagnosed with ADHD sort of starts very early on. I since elementary school, not paying attention in class. I was misdiagnosed as doesn't listen to authority, can't pay attention, can't sit still, willful, all those sort of things.
Did you get
And
labeled with operational defiance disorder at any point? I don't think
no,
you've
that I
gone
don't
at
think
that
I
extreme
don't.
level, but
I've only heard that term in the last few years. There was
problematic
no
diagnosis.
such thing as a diagnosis back. Like you either went to the principal's office or you did what you were told was really the two diagnoses they had for kids when I went to school in the 80s. We've come a long way since then, but that was pretty much it. You were a troublemaker or you were a good student. That was it. I was the troublemaker. Troublemaking for me looked like getting the encyclopedia off the shelf when the teacher wasn't looking and reading about the physics of aeronautics in third grade because I was tired of doing the multiplication tables over and over again. It was being able to like pass tests and not have to study or do my homework and still get good enough grades. That eventually caught up with me. I kind of struggled a little bit by the time I hit high school because I couldn't kind of pass that stuff. But for a while, it worked. But a lot of my not paying attention to what was happening in the front of the class was me paying attention to atlases and encyclopedias that were hiding in my desk or that I was able to like pull out of my desk. So I loved learning. But what I got a lot of was the imposition of frustration from adults, whether it was my parents, it was teachers, it was any adult. It was the you're very smart became a very weaponized thing very early on because it came with a condition of why don't you just. And the why don't you just was a satisfier for them. Why don't I make their life easier? Why don't I just pay attention? Why don't I just
You don't think
do
any of
the
the
thing
adults
that they
had any
expect
other
of me?
motivations for that? Not that we need to
I'm
unpack
sh-
that, but
I'm sure there was to an extent, but like it wasn't to like I think today it's a little like today like the way that I'm talking to my kids is that like you're not distracted. You're finding more interesting things. Like we're going to talk about the difference between when distraction takes away from safety. But when it comes to like content, you go find the thing that's interesting to you. So I think there are ways to nurture this, but this wasn't about that. This was about like eyes forward.
Mhm.
Was the conversation, and so yeah, a lot of it was, there are 6 other students that can sit next to you and stare at the blackboard all day long. What's wrong with you? You're smart enough. You should be able to sit and stare at a blackboard, and that was a direct correlation. And so that went on until I somehow managed to like skirt my way through school, and even when I hit my professional life, then it was more you're very smart, but why can't you just like fill out that form, like put in your expense report on time? And what that was always considered was the table stakes of the role that you're in or the level you're at, that kind of stuff. And so I would go into end of year reviews after end of year reviews for almost 20 years where people would sit down and say like, you blew the doors off of every project. The ones that we kind of threw you as like this will keep him busy for a while because it's sort of halfway impossible and we have low expectations. No one expected you to actually finish it, but you finished it. Well, you couldn't get your expense reports on time. You couldn't show up. Half your meetings you're showing up a little late. Your emails are full of grammatical errors. Like why can't, these are the table stakes. Why can't you just? And so this question of why can't you just has been sort of on my shoulders since I can remember. And the liberation that I got from this diagnosis, which I reflect on a little bit differently today. I'm thinking about how when I think about a neurodivergence diagnosis or an ADHD diagnosis as being less of a medical diagnosis and more of a social position, station. It was still, after 35 years, it answered that question of why can't you adjust? And I was very comfortable with, because I'm not, as being the answer. And it was because a lot of the other things that seemed to come along with the definition, not a singular definition. If you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. And so a lot of the things that I recognized in the periphery were things that I actually really like about myself, in that it's like I'm constantly curious in the way that I get creative about things and the way that I see things as being interconnected and all of that. And so I was able to now say some of my favorite things are also like, this is the cost, is that I can't get my expense report in on time. And I'm willing to make that concession for the creative shit that I do every day. Any day a week. If anyone offered me that deal, I'd take it every day. So it was the first time I really became comfortable with, great. So this is sort of that it's not exactly a redemption arc in terms of like I burned a lot of people or that sort of thing, but like that catharsis of like 35 years, there was a lot of energy put into like, every time I went into those conversations and between like teachers, family, employers, that kind of stuff. It was me walking out and going like, yeah, why can't I figure this out? I love impossible problems. I love sorting through this shit. Why is this the one that I can't figure out? And it's been a stress that has existed forever. And the moment that was lifted was clouds parting, like fucking cue the Monty Python animation of the angels heralding. It was a moment. And when I found that resonated with other people and that they found connection and inclusion in that was, I don't know that I originally was able to put my finger on that, but it resonated enough that I went, yes, like more come, like, and not only that, but like, I think we've talked about this before. We've maybe not here, but like, I notice a prevalence of neurodivergence in this community of folks that are attracted to complexity. And again, whether it's actual diagnosis or people that are just sort of attuned to the connection of things and the sort of volatility of things and curious about things and comfortable asking more questions and all of those sort of things that are not beyond anyone at all. But those of us that usually find ourselves in the corner of the sort of game cafe, like all of all of our stereotypes or all of our cornerings, I think this is a place where we collect, and so I'm finding that community here as well in an interesting. Subversive is not the right way to say it. It's just the Venn diagram is so overlapped. I'm starting to run out of steam on that.
Yeah, no, it's good. So, I think it's a natural conclusion. I'm gathering my thoughts. Because I'm on the
couch now.
And how do you feel about your mother?
Well, so
No time for that. um, so you and I have talked about the neurodivergence topic, she says, as if it's like a topic with a hashtag. But
right.
I think we even talked about it in this chat a little bit, but we should come back to that too. I'm just going to write this down right now so that I don't forget.
Do it.
Neurodivergence and my ROI. We'll come back to those two things. But so anybody who's listening to this who has probably interacted with Kyle. If you've interacted with either of us, if it's not both of us, odds are greater that it's Kyle, because Kyle is the magnet on the stick sweeping out, as you'll remember from like episode 3. Whereas I'm the magnet that's a little bit
the wide accretion zone,
the giant bowling ball. I still move around, but like,
yes.
Things get sucked in, whatever. So to that end, I'm almost like, I find this intriguing because I think there are probably a lot of people who have experiences similar to what you've described, even if there are very meaningful differences. There is the difference between inclusion and belonging. And so I think there's something about this where you are trying to ensure that we're not just being inclusive, but that we're creating the conditions for folks to feel belonging. And this community, meaning people who I think are generally drawn to systems-oriented work, complexity science as an intellectual community, which is its own problematic thing these days. I don't even know. Participatory, sense-making, narrative kind of hashtag. I feel like I'm hearing you tell this story, and I'm now understanding that you are like largely doing this on behalf of all the like other Kyles out there. Like there's a lot of young Kyle. For little Kyle, like, if either of us had to have like a slogan, like every time you enact some form of making sure somebody else doesn't get turned off by something, it's for little Kyle. And I know that sounds, I don't mean it in the like snarky reductionist parodying way that I think it comes out. I mean it authentically. And you can totally like say, no, you've got it wrong, Jen. But I just am hearing this like, for little Kyle, and I think probably most people have some version of this motivation for whatever they're doing, which is, I've had an experience, there are experiences multiple in my life that now I understand this differently, and I'd like to make it easier or better for people coming along. And it makes sense to hear you describe it. What strikes me is how different my own experiences, how I'm that is not my motivation. It is not, and in two ways. One, the topic of neurodivergence in general, and then two, like I'll come back to the why the hell do I care to invite people into this world. But I do want to say, I think one of the reasons that some of the richest topics that you and I encounter around definitions of rigor, multiple ways of knowing, epistemic injustice / justice, epistemic integrity, epistemic, humility. I think one of the reasons these are some of the richest seams for us to have conversations about are because of the different motivating experiences that one brings into any of your work. So, you are pretty able quickly to reflect and share that story. You've done some reflection on it. You've thought through it. You've probably talked about it and processed it out loud in settings outside of this. And to some extent, I think that makes a huge difference in the way that one engages with any kind of work that is meant to acknowledge diverse perspectives. Like, first, know thyself, right?
Yeah.
And I would be curious for our audience, all 5 of you, hi guys, if this is something.
I think we're up by a few.
We might be up to 20. I don't know. But I'm curious to hear from others if this is something people do, like by virtue of being curious, being lifelong learners. I mean, everybody is reflective. Everybody, to some extent, is having life experiences and bringing their reflections on those experiences into other things they're doing. But why does it seem so extra present in this world? And why is it so much more common than average, at least in my observation, that people want a complexity or systems oriented practice to be more than just this is how I do my work, but rather this bigger, this is my personal orientation to life, this is my philosophical blah blah blah, this is my mindset, this is my way of knowing and being, this is my like consciousness shift, right? And you can sense the tone in my voice as I get further along in these phrases, right? So I've kind of, I think a lot about like why it is that this type of intellectual community does seem to attract both folks who are very interested in computational modeling and some of the like management practices that are informed by complex adaptive systems science. At the same time, it's the folks who are like, I've had an emotional epiphany about the role of humans in the world and my place therein, and I want to like sing and missionary and evangelize and so I don't have a tidy conclusion to what I'm saying in words right this minute, but I kind of wanted to like mark that what I hear is not just, I think, a compelling description of, the experiences of life that you bring to your craft and your practice that also inform why I think you are, someone who does take that joy in connecting. It isn't the reason when I first asked about collecting people, again, it is exactly here to hear. I wanted to hear this distinction because it's not that you care about having this many people in your social network and this many bottles of liquor or hot sauce or this many records on the wall or CDs behind you, right? It's not about like the quantity or even the quality of the connections. It's knowing that you're the vehicle or the force by which you're enabling that. So like if doing anything in the world means enabling others, making connections that are meaningful to them is like your life's purpose. I don't want to get into that nonsense, but like that is very different from I just like meeting people so I can have more LinkedIn connections or I can have someone in my network who can help me out later when I need some help with something. And I suspect, because we hear so much talk about connective tissue, people who are weavers and connectors and the interstitium, and these themes abound. So to your point, there's a self-selection happening. Maybe that goes hand in hand with some neurodivergence kind of themes. But I also, this is where the contrast shows up.
There's another big one.
I don't think it's given. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. So I can put a little bit of a button on that, I think, and I'm not going to speak for everyone, of course. I would also love to hear people contribute what attracts them. And I want to put a little note on the little Kyle component because it deserves to be said in this recording. And then I want to hand you the mic, and because in the spirit of all people welcome and coming into the space from different directions, like you have a different story and a different thing that brings you here, and that is equally valid, and like we need to explore that plenty as well. So the little Kyle thing, I have a lot of interest in creating a space actually for at-risk, I hate to say at-risk, your neurodivergent youth. That's the sort of such a clinical representation. But make a place for kids that are struggling to find place. Now, you can't just be like an old white guy waving your hand around saying, hey, at-risk kids, come hang out, because that's creepy as hell. And so the world doesn't...
The complexity man.
Right, exactly. So if anyone knows how to do this sort of thing, reach out and in a above board, safe kind of way, please.
Don't get me put on a list, please.
Yeah, God. So the truth is, people that are diagnosed with autism, ADHD, across multiple different neurodivergence diagnoses, have a life expectancy 10 years less than everyone else. That's because I think the number that I last read was something like around 35% fall into addiction by the time they're 20 years old. The other is the amount of stress that is involved in navigating the neurotypical world, which it's probably bears now's the right time to make a little bit of that social diagnoses distinction I was trying to make before,
Yeah.
where I'm not talking about brain wiring being different. I'm not talking about physiology. I'm talking about the societies we've constructed that reward a certain types of behaviors and people that are comfortable acclimating to those and are look at or have built those structures firm enough that people like me have to either mask, adapt different ways that are very unnatural feeling to us, very stressful, have all sorts of different coping mechanisms to go operate in the neurotypical world. That's the social diagnosis. And so the stresses of doing that cause all sorts of health problems that ultimately end this way. And
Yeah.
so, yes, would love to address a youth component of that, the little Kyle, to say there is a place. There, it's not just like just get through high school, which that seems to be like just finish school seems to be this like if you can just do that, then you'll be off in the world, and then you'll be somebody else's problem. That's what so many of these kids I keep hearing burnt out parents talking about their kids in that way, and it's crushing.
Yeah.
But that seems to be like our normal way of it's like how we treat our elderly in this country.
Yeah.
Like how do we just push them through the one thing we're required to do and then abandon them?
Yeah.
I would love the opportunity to just at least once get in front of a few people and say, no, there's a place that would love the way that you think and approach things, would love to hear your voice. So if that's an opportunity, would love to do that.
So what I think is most compelling to me listening to you talk about this, like just as a friend, a colleague, whatever, a co-conspirator on things, um, that's not one and the same necessarily as being so compelled by complexity and systems practice, the things we talk about a lot on here, but that this space, this intellectual community, virtual, amorphous as it is a space of that type for you. You found this space to
That's
be
it.
that
If I was a professional football player,
right,
I might say the same thing. Come onto the field. Meet me
right,
at 5 a.m.
right,
We're going to go run drills.
exactly.
That's not my thing, though.
And this field, metaphorically, this community, presented itself, appeared in your life, whatever, like arose around you and became a space that offered that to you in a way that that other people can and would benefit from, and that not everybody ultimately gets to experience. And so
yeah,
I have a problem with the word evangelism, but it's kind of like the one that's most accessible. But the evangelism, Scrooge, on the morning of there's the part of that is because it isn't so much that this is the one and only place and the one like where people out there are like, this is the place to raise your consciousness, guys. This is the church of complexity. But it is because it was for you and has been for you one of the places that actually provides this belonging and true community that you in turn you want people to see this space. You want them to see the door that they can walk through, to know that they are welcome, to probably know that there are people who might miss this, who might walk past the door and not see that it's there. Probably, at least sounds to me like that would be crushing for you to think about happening. And so if what you do is, not to go super morbid, but like you can't save everyone, like Schindler's List style. Can you keep a few? Can you open a few? Can you keep? So, I kind of just wanted to mark that. Like I wanted to highlight and mark that because again, I have to assume there are a lot of people in this community. Some are probably watching or listening who can feel and identify with that. And I just think that it's worth separating it from just the garden variety I got jazzed about this new field or this interesting science, and I want everyone to learn about it because I'm about to stake my consulting business on it. So it needs to be the one
Right.
true way of doing it, which really we see so much of right now, you know? So,
Yeah.
anyway, I just think that's intriguing. I also, I do hear others talk about, okay, so the neurodivergence thing, let's talk about it.
Mhm.
The neurodivergence thing. I don't know if I am or would qualify. And I don't know that there's a box. It doesn't matter to me. You and I have talked about this, but
Yeah.
I do wonder. I would love to hear from other people on this. I would love to hear other people's experiences. I know there are tons of people who definitely associate complexity slash systems slash, again, I don't even know what to call this, like, amorphous thing that isn't
Hmm.
just complex adaptive system science, right? Like the amorphous community that we're
Yeah.
talking about, hand waving to.
Fair enough. Use the shorthand. It's
You
okay.
know, there's the interest in thinking about this world as one where neurodiversity is
Hmm.
is you know, at play and on purpose present, or queering of these spaces, right?
Yes.
And like there's so much talk and chatter about this, but I actually would really love to hear from more people about, like, on an individual level, the
Hmm.
on the individual experience. Has this space offered people the same thing that you've described experiencing? Um, I like want that to, I mean, we should just start when we have other people on
Well,
our show. We'll have to start asking them on our show.
yeah.
Like,
Yes.
we're gonna start asking people this question because I want to hear
Yes.
more about it. Because
I like that.
I didn't have that has not been my experience, but not in a way that I'm like, I didn't get anything special out of it. Like, it's just different for
Right.
me. And so to share this, like,
Let me throw
what?
that button at that
Yeah.
that other angle at you real quick, because
Yeah.
this might button something up for you,
Okay.
which is that one of the core things that we're doing by investigating these complex adaptive systems, by doing this work, I hate to say change makers, systems change, all that kind of stuff. I know, right? It's we throw it around like it's just a thing. It's how we clock in the morning, and that's not it. But these are also people that are attracted to the idea of unseating systems that have unwelcomed them. And that is a real close correlation to what it is to be neurodivergent, and to be uh, just outside. And so being able to see things a little bit different, being invalidated, and the work we do around epistemic justice, epistemic sovereignty, weak signals, all of those sort of things. There's a tie into that as well. That is, I want to hear all sorts of different perspectives because they're valid and they're worth
Yeah.
not just acknowledging, but building on. This is where innovation will come from. Ultimately, it will not come from our echo chambers or from status quo or from, you know, these heterogeneous spaces, and so homogeneous spaces. And so this idea of queering the system is very much akin to what it is to be divergent and observing from the outside.
I mean, there's a million ways that,
Again, don't let me speak for everybody.
of course not. You're speaking for Kyle, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that both welcoming, passively, as well as actively pulling in and connecting and drawing as many different perspectives as possible. There are many ways and reasons that that is good and desirable and
Mm-hmm.
beneficial. Even if you name some of the trade-offs or the downsides of any of that, nonetheless, like, the equation always comes out net positive. And like I said earlier too, I mean, on a personal motivation level, it can be for any reason, right? I know people for whom it is about safety in numbers. It is about increasing a level of confidence in decision making because you've included so much relational narrative data. For some people, it is more about making it really important that everybody feels seen and heard because that creates a certain outcome that we want to see. For other people, it's about creating the space rather than the others feeling seen. It's more about the space and the relational dynamic. Like, well, it doesn't matter. Like at some point, you're just psychoanalyzing someone, or you're going to assign them an Enneagram number
Right.
based on why. Why do you want to include people, right? Are you a 2 or a
Right.
7 or a 6? Like, I don't know. But I think related to this is just that I almost heard, and what the last thing you said was almost this, like, there's a bit of a revenge story that, maybe I experienced being, and I'm oversimplifying. So you don't have to
Yeah.
defend against it because it's not that simple. You can, I'm
Yeah.
not going to deny you the chance, but
No.
to just give
I
like a
understand.
narrative trope here and a shortcut, this that to some extent, maybe we've all experienced some form of some kind of either injustice or not feeling or included or belonging or having our ability to either help ourselves or others, being stymied by the systems, the structures around us. There's almost a bit of like, the revenge or the video game kind of story, which is that I'm trying to dismantle or at least interrogate some of the systems that have made things bad, to go with like very black and white, so that they will be less bad or even good in the future. And I see that in a lot of places. And this is where, like, in a very vulnerable and feeling almost risky way, I don't identify with that. Not because
That's
I have
fair.
not felt on the receiving end of the injustice, but almost because I feel like I exited the Nintendo game and I'm not trying to get revenge on anything.
I don't see it as I do see that sometimes, the chip on the shoulder.
Yeah.
The just being as an active resistance is
Yeah.
also a component sort of in the middle.
Yeah.
But I've also seen where people find their community and feel protective of their community. And it's not so much I need to take revenge so much as it is like, I would like a seat, but if I'm going to have a seat, then I'm going to pull up 20 more seats as well. And so that itself is a bit of a disruption. And if you've only set so many places and somebody pulls up 20 seats, you can say you've broken the whole thing, but that is kind of the point in some cases. It's not true. Like, it's not vengeance. It's not vengeance in a violent sense.
Yeah. I didn't mean it that way,
Maybe,
but like a seat at what? A seat at what table? And why?
Well,
and
a lot of the work that I was doing at Capital One, we couldn't not have a conversation about our performance evaluation system or our policies or process, and how people got promoted and how people got recognized, how people became the levels that they were. Those are the sort of things that in large organizations are where you start to see this embedded sort of a lot of what I was talking about, where like the table stakes at your level are to be able to do these things. People used to tell me all the time, when you finally have an administrative assistant, this will stop being a problem for you. Well, great. Promote me up to a position where you're going to give me an administrative assistant. Problem fucking solved. Then you can just use me for my strengths. Doesn't that make sense? Right. Yeah. So, or just give me an administrative assistant at whatever level I am. It sounds like we've got a plan here. Otherwise, you have to like sort of rewire the way that I behave.
Yeah, but that's just people kind of deferring to the system that exists and the incentives that are outside of
what we're talking about.
But that's my point about seat at the table. And I mean, I say revenge. I don't mean that I really think, but mostly because of the turn of phrase I think you used around, people experiencing some form of injustice and wanting to reduce the injustice that others feel after them. Like just the notion of women, finding more power and greater, equity in the world, and like throwing that ladder down to those who follow you, and instead of stomping on them on the way up, that kind of thing. It extended beyond, but I hear that metaphor used a lot for women.
Yeah, and I don't know that my wife would ever sit down and say I'm fighting the injustice of women, but she would say I'm going to make sure that I have I'm heard at the table.
Right.
And that's not all that different, but it's necessary,
Right. Well, so that's kind of where, like, and part of why I asked the, like, well, seat at what table, right? And everybody has to everyone has their own personal calculus as to like which systems inside systems are the places where they want to invest the energy. There is no system that there's everybody who is alive in 2025 is embedded within systems, some of which are harmful and abusive, and no amount of like either trying to exit or mitigate or preempt are going to change that, you know? So there's a certain level of like, you cannot avoid the gray area personal value calculus, even if you pretend you are, through some level of, you know, trying to be as good as you can be. No amount of that is going to eliminate it. So, you know, some people I think suffer a lot of psychic dissonance for that fact, but like, you know, at some point you have to acknowledge and then accept that there's a personal calculus around where you, so if you want to put the energy into changing the way that performance reviews happen inside Capital One, like that is your thing. And I don't mean it like, well, that's your thing if that's what you want to waste your time on, but truly, like, that's kind of why I say I feel like everybody's got a unique and personal calculus. And part of why I like this story and I like listening to this when I talk to other people about it is I don't know if people recognize that it is a very different and personal calculus for everyone, including people who have a level of solidarity and shared meaning around even things like everything we're talking about. Everybody who would self-identify as like, I'm into this stuff, I'm into shared you know, I'm into the sense making and narrative inquiry and research, and I'm into epistemic justice. I'm into complexity and systems and futures. And everybody who would listen to this and kind of be like an ally, you know, to everything we talk about, every single person has an individual calculus around where that fight happens. And I think it's almost a disservice we do to pretend sometimes that we're all literally on that same wavelength. I guess I'll just leave it at that because this is going to turn into like an hour long soapbox. It's
and let's run the like ticker tape on the bottom that says like, I'm also a cisgendered, straight, white, middle-aged Christian American middle-class male. Like I check all of the visible boxes all day long.
Don't worry, no one's coming for you, Kyle.
Yeah, it's like, so like, please, like, no violins or anything. So the privilege cart is loaded.
So I mean, I think that you probably acknowledge that and call it out even more than maybe is even necessary. You know, there's, like I said, I think you operate with a heightened.
There's a relationship there, though.
Yeah, of course. But I just mean, I think you operate and model a heightened sensitivity to it in an admirable way. This is not an indictment. But I think that it's something that, well, it's its own conversation is what it is. But I don't want to lose. Okay, so the neurodivergent / neurodiversity topic is an interesting one. And I think that, I think to your point about thinking about social experience rather than psychiatric diagnosis is important to keep in mind too here. But when we were chatting with Jeff Gold in our recent episode, we were talking about school very briefly. I didn't really chime in. You guys were both saying like, yeah, you know, I was like an okay student, but I did a little of everything. It was in the service of generalism, being a generalist. You know, I did a lot of everything and it was great. I was not a great student, but you know, I was fine. I was okay. And both of you were kind of just like, you know, Jeff.
You were a great student.
I was a fucking great student.
Yeah.
But I wasn't like the gold star grade me, I want my A's student. Here's a little tiny story that goes along with what you said earlier. When I was little, I was a terrible student because I did exactly what you did. I was bored as hell by most things happening in school. And I'd get a worksheet. You know, we were supposed to read a story and I'd get a worksheet to fill out. And the questions would be like, why did the character do whatever? And I would just write because she felt like it. Like I was just writing whatever the fuck I cared. You know, I was just like writing whatever. I was like in second grade. I was like, didn't really understand why I was getting zeros on these things. I also would pull out the encyclopedia in the back of the room. So I kind of was like, everything to not laugh at that. And now you're taking me with aeronautics.
How many people here?
When you realize it's not Bernoulli's equation that leads us to flight. No, I'm just kidding. But basically, same experience. But here's where our stories diverge. at some point in elementary school, and I don't remember when, I want to say it was maybe third or fourth grade, you know, when you have the different like groups. Well, this was in my era where you would get put into different groups for like, for reading or for math. You didn't stay with the same teacher. They divided us out into some levels. This was like in the kind of proto tracking days in elementary school. And now they you know, it's the pendulum swings. So for years you do this, then for years you stop doing it. So when I was in elementary school, for reading and math, you would actually go into like one of 4 groups with different teachers. And I was in like the lowest for both of them. And I just remember like one time, I don't know why. I don't know if my mom or somebody might have been like, what if you just answer those questions like the way you know that they want them to be answered? And it was not totally the why don't you just, but something happened. And again, maybe she didn't say anything. Maybe I just had, I do not remember. But what I do remember is that one time on a reading comprehension worksheet, I just decided to answer the questions the way that I knew the worksheet was looking for. I didn't want to say teacher because this isn't on teachers. I mean, this is like a structural thing, right? And I just answered the questions I knew the way the worksheet wanted them answered. And I got 100 on it. And I remember afterwards getting that 100 and being like, that's it. That's all this takes. That's all you guys want. And then the next year I was in all the like higher groups and bluebirds and getting hundreds on things. And like, this is partly why, almost as a checking privilege kind of instinct, I don't know when people say, oh, Jen, like you've got to be, you know, are you this, you that? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have a diagnosis and I've not ever sought one because I don't have the experiences that typically lead people to seek them. But people are always like, oh, I know, I've got my like in this neurodivergent radar, which I'm like, what a problematic fucking idea.
We
But
travel in packs, I like to say.
yeah. So like, you know, by virtue of being as interested in all the same things that, you know, all the people we're talking about are, but I part of why I wonder and part of why I hesitate to say is because I didn't have a hard time. Once I recognized all I had to do was like answer the questions the way they wanted them to be answered. And the benefit that I received when I did that was that I earned way more freedom and way more rights and privilege. The fact was, if I played their game a little bit, I fucking cashed in. Okay, let's go. Giddy up. So from there through the end of high school, you know, straight A's. Like I think I was 4th in my class or something like that. I did not identify with any of the other kids I was in class with in that I don't want to be like, I didn't have to work hard. Like I did. I studied, you know, by the time I was in high school, I wanted to be a good student so that I could open all the doors I wanted open for me. Again, it's like, it's about freedom. And I also loved learning, like you, like us, like everybody, you know, so I wanted as much access to as much information and learning as I could get. And I knew that like by performing school, I earned it. So I was playing the game on purpose in that way, but I did not belong. I felt this intense lack of belonging with my fellow honor students, most of whom, you know, they worked hard, they studied, but like there was something that wasn't there on the inside, that they didn't always really grok something, or that they didn't want to like really think about the philosophical implications of XYZ thing in physics or whatever. And it was actually the like, you know, the burnouts, the metal kids, the middle of the, you know, pack mediocre C students that I actually would end up finding that kind of rapport and relationship with. So, you know, I'd sit at a lunch table with those kids, or, you know, I was friends with them outside of school. And I had all kinds of weird friend groups that we won't get into. So the reason I share that story though, is because, you know, because of that, I don't have the kind of experience that made me feel the way you describe feeling. I felt like an outsider in a lot of ways for a lot of reasons that just weren't that. But arriving at, say, the complexity community, if you will, was far less about finding a place where my style of thinking or my way of making sense of the world suddenly felt like it belonged. Because by the time I found this community, I actually kind of gave up on finding that. I don't care about that. Because I'm not sure even this space offers that. I kind of feel like at times there's no space that is really ever going to make 100% sense for like the way I make meaning in the world. And like, that's okay. But what it did offer for me was more other humans who do like learning about lots of things. And there are humans like that in a lot of places, not
Sure.
just the community that we're talking about, complexity and systems and stuff. But there's enough of a meta connective tissue focus, right? See earlier part of chat, that
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like I hit a seam. I hit a bit of a gold mine seam, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was like, oh, okay, this is it. And that was for me the, oh, oh kind of moment. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if you flip it around and say, okay, Jen, what's your what's your motivation? Why are you doing this? Why are you so
So
willing?
much energy and time
Yeah.
invested in this
Why would
community.
you
Why?
put energy into this? And I do it because it actually gives me back more energy. Okay. I mean, I think in
Mm-hmm.
the end, a lot of the answers to that question for any human are you put energy into things for a couple reasons. Either
Yeah.
the things you put the energy into are going to return you energy or something in response, or the investment of energy earns you something else, like the job, putting the energy into this job, even if I don't believe it,
Mm-hmm.
gets me through to a place where I can accomplish something else. It's an adjacent possible, it's a
Right.
stepping stone, a lily pad, whatever. But I definitely have found that always, well, not always, being as very open to, so if you're a magnet on a stick and I'm
You're the
magnet that's
giant
got just like a
bowling ball.
large accretion zone or whatever,
Yep.
when things fall into this zone, it's less energy spent by me because I'm just kind of making myself available. So I don't see it as much as like spending energy. For me, it's more about keeping the metaphorical like satellite dish or receiving dish like tuned, actively tuned, so that as people fall into or come across my radar, across my tractor beam or whatever, it's less about an expenditure of energy to connect, and it's
Mm-hmm.
more about being tuned to what could actually be energized if I'm sending a certain energy beam. Is it going to excite the electrons in that thing the right way? I mean, this is terrible metaphors. So to that end, when there is some level of a connection, whether it's just interacting with a person who's got really interesting or different perspectives or things that make me think or make, I am just basically always in search of people or experiences that are going to make me go, huh. And I have found that the complexity world has a richer, higher percentage, a higher purity of that mineral than a lot of other intellectual communities. It's not the only one, and that's why it's not my only community. It's not my only activity. And it's not even one of many activities I talk about here. There are a lot of things I do that I don't talk about online. You guys don't know about, you're not going to know about. But there is definitely that common thing that is, I want to experience aporia, awe, disorienting dilemmas, encounters with difference. I am addicted to that. I am addicted to learning in a probably problematic way. I get the dopamine rush. It lights up the opioid circuitry. And I'm at the point now where if you want to go back to, and maybe this is problematic, so I apologize in advance, but this notion that to be someone who is neurodivergent, and because of the way we have to either adapt to the world, and it is not natural for us, or if we don't do that, we have to learn to accept all the ways that there is infinite friction between us and the people in the world around us. You build coping mechanisms. And for some people, you build healthy coping mechanisms. And for some people, you take on unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance abuse. And I wonder at some point in my life if I just accidentally adopted learning as my coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky for me, learning is way healthier for the body than
Yeah.
opioid addiction. And
Sure.
so I then have this positive or reinforcing feedback loop now happening because the thing I'm
Mm-hmm.
addicted to also is good for me. And it also enables all kinds of other things. So I'm not interested in like fighting this addiction. There are
Nope.
places
That's
where
a good
I've
one.
had to learn how to, well, I'm very aware of it now. And I also have learned there's a limit and a difference between wanting to voraciously just learn things for the sake of it rather than learning in an instrument towards some other end. And so the other end of this, where, you know, the ROI concept, is that I do still, in my sort of heart of hearts, my core, I would not just be happy to like be by myself with like an infinite source of learning material. I do get the sort of greatest joy from, almost in some ways, facilitating the opportunity for other people to have that same experience. So that is the exact parallel, right? And that's like my version of your story, which is I take no greater pleasure than sort of, I often use the liberating word, but it's not about liberating people from power struggles or from assumptions about their own worth or others or things of that sort. I want to help people get free in the way that a lot of people in our world, I think, talk about it. But for me, it's liberatory in that it's putting these tools or information or experiences or awe in front of people in a way that they're going to then make some meaning out of it. And so that is my long-winded and probably not all that coherent sort of answer to the question. But I think listeners, close listeners, can probably see some similar shapes. And so why I say that I see a contrast is because I think our origins or our motivating kind of descriptions of ourselves are different. And it's probably also one of the reasons that you and I have good conversations at times about rigor. And I will pause here in a moment, but I will bring this back around to say, you know, you started talking about Dionysus or Dionysus, I don't know how you say it, but I couldn't help but laugh because there is a Rush song called
Of
Hemispheres,
course there is.
and it is about Dionysus and Apollo and what happens when we kind of fall too much on one side or the other, right? A lot of like, you know,
Sure.
love and affect and good wine,
Excess.
good
Yeah.
experiences, you know, and then Apollo, the god of reason and rationality, and it's a masterpiece of a song. And you know what the moral of that story is, right? The heart and mind
Of
united in
course.
a single perfect sphere. So there is
Of course.
definitely there is like that tension in a very creative and like juicy, good generative way at play for me at
Yeah.
all times. But
Yeah.
that's why I hesitate on neurodivergence, because I, out of respect for people who actually have either been diagnosed, but even if they're not, for them, if it has been a struggle, I almost in some ways would say for me, if I am neurodivergent, isn't everybody in some way, but if I am neurodivergent, it ended up becoming an actual plus, not something that, you know, made my life harder. And I do know I experience low latent inhibition, which we've talked about. I do know that I experience sensory processing sensitivity, not disorder, different thing. And so, you know, those count, but I don't know. The rest of it, I don't know. Big shrug.
Which is fair, without a doubt. Absolutely. So, I so many things. I don't need. I don't need
We're
to.
gonna
I
have
don't
to
need to.
label this episode as just therapy slash
It
like
is
origin story. You guys can skip this one if you want.
from the swamp to the couch. Is what we're doing today. Closing up the year on this one.
Freud called.
I
What's our
I wanted
Jungian,
to.
our Carl Jung style archetypes? We should do that next. No, just go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, um, I'm glad you finally came to the you want to bring that experience to others, because I'm listening to you
Like, I'm
talk
so glad
about
this
like
long-winded story. You took an hour to
what
get there, Jen.
you well no you're talking about like I want more interesting things, and I'm like, I hope people aren't sitting here thinking like you just need to like be entertained by that, like we're the like this is the complexity gladiator arena, and you know we're just coming by with like turkey legs and you're that's because every time we're talking you're like, you know what, you're gonna like these people and here's a link to something and
Oh
you
yeah,
should check this out, go down. And every time you talk to somebody, I mean not every time, oftentimes you talk to somebody and then talk to me like, have you met this person, they're doing this is interesting. You're connected, you're
yeah,
invested in not just what can I glean from this person, but also like maybe it's pollination in the true sense of the word, that it's less deliberate. Like people like to say I'm a pollinator as if it's a
Yeah.
true thing. Like it's
Yeah.
like bees know what they're doing,
Yeah.
but you are pollinating in that, like I was saying before, like it's sort of natural in that, like the, hey,
Yeah.
I like Bluthaus Nord, and you're like, really? Have you heard Satyricon? That should make no sense to most to our 20 listeners. I don't imagine any of them are black metal fans, but um, to drop a band name and to say, interesting, you should check this one out too.
Well,
You do that
yeah, and
effortlessly.
I do. And I mean, I've even said at this point, I've had other people say this to me, so I've adopted it. Like people will joke that, like, yeah, my love language is here's a link or a URL or a thing. You know, I meet somebody for the very first time, and in my thank
Right.
you for the chat email, it's have you ever read this? You'd love this or whatever.
Did you make mixtapes for people in school?
Not really.
Okay.
So here's why. I did like later in life,
I
love,
did
love
constantly.
interests, like
Right.
the first time when I started dating my now husband,
Mm-hmm.
um, when we both were getting, I think, ready to go away for Christmas break or something. We were in college. Whatever. There was something where we were going to be going away for a while. We made each other a mixtape. Didn't know the other one was doing it, of course. And like, not only did
Mm-hmm.
we exchange mixtapes, kind of like sheepishly, like, is it too much that I made one? And then it was like, oh, you made one too. Okay, phew. Like, it's like, who
Right.
says I love you first, that kind of thing. But we ended up having similar songs. We actually had 2 or 3 of the same songs on our mixtapes. So like those. But here's why I didn't do it for like everybody. There's an act of intimacy in that I'm not offering
Mm.
to everyone. And I
Mm.
definitely wasn't offering to everyone when I was younger.
Mm.
And doing the kind of curated suggesting and connecting on a certain level that you describe is still to me a little too intimate. And I'm not really interested in sharing on that level with everyone. But I also have
Yes.
gotten over the years much better at it's not about hoarding information or knowledge for me, but it's more about trusting, because when you release something, when you share something, even when you make a recommendation, you're sharing something about yourself by recommending
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah.
um I have learned to get a lot more comfortable with kind of just setting that free, and like whatever it means to someone is what it means, right? But basically now if I meet somebody or if I chat with somebody about something, like 9 times out of 10 there's an email that comes with like some links to a YouTube video or to a book or something that I don't expect anybody to ever go read it. But to your point, I think the pollinator metaphor is a little bit is far more apt for me than connecting. My business partner and I
Mm-hmm.
joke that he likes to connect people and I like to connect ideas, and that's probably pretty
Mm-hmm.
true. I think most people in this space like to connect all things, connect the dots, connect
Mm-hmm.
disparate domains, connect patterns, blah blah blah. But I am far, far, far more of the instinct to do less direct or even primary connecting or even suggesting, much more interested in just sprinkling some shit around. And the people who find it in an organic way or engage with it. And even when I send somebody links, it's actually more like that, because a lot of times I know what happens is like you get links from someone in an email, you're like, oh God, I'll just check it out later. I'm not going to go watch it right this second. I mean, I do that a lot, but I know a lot of people don't.
Mm-hmm.
6 months later, someone will go watch or listen or read something, and then I'll hear from them and they'll go,
Right.
this just landed, or I just finally got around to this and it's perfect. The timing was perfect for me. And so that Kairos idea, right? I am far more comfortable just scattering the pollen or leaving the Easter
Mm-hmm.
eggs around, because I know that the experience of encountering something when the Kairos dictates its meaningfulness is so much more powerful. So that
Yep.
is what I want to enact or enable for other people. And that's to say, if somebody wants to come and ask questions or learn, like I love
Right.
educating, but not in the
Mm-hmm.
I want to teach. I don't want to teach or instruct.
Right.
I want to facilitate learning. And that is all of that on display, I think.
Love that. You introduced Karen Barad to me a year ago, and like 2 months ago, I finally was like, I've been turning this off for too long. I'm interested now. Let's go. And
Yeah.
then it was like the marathon because I was hooked.
My favorite. So
Mhm.
I do wonder sometimes why it is that I am okay, in theory, never hearing the gratification that something I shared or did landed for somebody, or that somebody, again, the liberating experience of encountering a perspective or an idea that just shakes loose some things. I I think all of us like would want to identify with being that kind of like
The
liberator.
conduit.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the thing is I want to go away from being the liberator.
Right.
I want to be the enabler, or I want to be just part of the world. I want to be part of the world. I want to be of the
Hmm.
world in which liberation can be available to anybody.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
is for some reason a little easier for me, I think, than average folks, because I think folks do want to be able to see the impact of their work. We've talked about the making thing and all that. And
Hmm.
I do think part of this is because I did spend the first 10 years or so of my like professional life, my career as a teacher, you do not get to see the real impact of your presence on students, honestly, ever. I mean, yeah, you see their grades on a test, like who cares about that, but like the real impact, if you have it at all, if you're not immediately forgotten by most students, which is also part of the fate of being a teacher, you almost never ever hear about it. And I had a handful of times where students reached out to me many years later and had very beautiful and like heartbreakingly warm, amazing things to say about whatever impact I had on them, but it's not a guarantee. And so I think there's probably just something about having life experiences that teach you to like be fine with like not getting that direct feedback. Um, and you just trust that it's going to land or it's not. And so you become like you said, I'm an agent of something or a vector of
Hmm.
something, but
Right.
it's not a direct, it's an indirect thing.
I love that you're saying that because, and you kind of alluded to this earlier while I was talking, and we've talked about this. We're gonna have to put a sticky on the board because let's not go down this rabbit hole today, but about how people that are in this complexity work and crowd around these complexity concepts don't necessarily embody the theory. The ideas of ambiguity or non-measurements are stressful to them. And what you're talking about is, I don't, I don't need to see myself in a cause-effect relationship with these things. And that's not because 2 years ago you listened to a talk about nonlinear causality and went, "Oh, I get it now."
Okay.
Something has existed for years, I'm sure, that that language has become available recently,
Yeah.
but your experiences were already there that
Yes.
made you just, yep, that's why
Yeah.
this makes sense to me.
In very much the way that is parallel with what you described. It wasn't that, yeah, I already experienced myself in that way and experienced my presence in the world in that way, not a cause effect dynamic. And I recognized it when I arrived at the complexity community. It was recognizing rather than having a shift already take place. So for, like in that same way, it was recognizing this as a space and recognizing dynamics in this space as familiar rather than, oh, I learned about dynamical systems and like took
Right.
some courses, which I did, which was lovely, but like it was
Hmm.
even, and this was a far earlier, I mean, and this is an interesting one, we'll have to go down that rabbit hole sometime, because
Yep.
for a lot of people there's a bit of a spiritual practice that leads to that, whether
Hmm.
people are into Eastern religions, Buddhism, Taoism, etc., or
Hmm.
whatever. For me it really was not that, but those things did factor in. Young Jen
Hmm.
did read and immerse in a lot of those worlds, but there's something there that I do wonder about. If you are arriving into a space, an intellectual community, where what that intellectual community is doing is either it looks familiar to you, it has the shape of, it rhymes with things you already know, and so you're like, yeah. Or if you arrive at that community and it is wholly new and mind-blowing to you. And I think that there are almost like well, there's many, but there's probably kind of like there's differences for people in the way that they're arriving at different forms or fields of study in that way.
Very much so. I believe so. And this is why I think when you opened up and we're talking about, I like to do the inclusion and belonging of the little league coach. It is because I feel there are people out there that will never learn our language, our in language, our identifiers for each other within this community, but are still intimate with the ideas. And we absolutely have plenty to talk about and
Yeah.
exchange and learn from each other. And
Yeah.
some of it is that adjacent language strengthens the language that is our in language now. I mean, my working with the emancipatory design folks that I worked with in the past gave me so much more of the ability to translate a lot of the complexity science into something that was more humane, that was more something that was attractive rather than just,
Yeah.
aren't these theories cool, nerds? Which is where I was coming at it from. That was what attracted me. But when I found out, from the Equity by Design folks, that this was something else, it flexed and opened up entire new doors.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, and I think that, also this kind of reminds me too, back to the one thing you were saying about, people, I made a face when you said like change making or whatever. And, this might be, a bridge too far or whatever, but like, that's not the goal for me. It's not the goal. Would I like to see change unfold in many systems? Would I like to see transformation unfold? Would I like to see destruction? Would I like to see, creative destruction, creative destabilization? Would I like to see new and novel things grow? Yes to all of these. And do I engage in activities, some of which, again, you guys hear all about, and some of which y'all are never going to hear about? And I engage in these practices and I engage in these activities with the notion that I am putting actants into the world, that I am playing with the substrate, but I don't even think about change in the goal-directed sense that I know, most people in
you saw where I was hemming and hawing over here.
So, because I still find that people who are very immersed in understanding the behavior of complex systems run up against this wall where they want to use what we learn from complexity science to achieve specific types of change. And right there, it's like your TikTok video, like, like, back up and try again. But that is a place where I still find myself a little bit like lonely, to be very candid, because most of the people that I engage with in this world who get it are still in positions where that is still the mission or the charter, whether it's the personal value-driven mission of that individual or whether it's the stated mission of an organization. I think there is still a bit of work in our intellectual community to really internalize what it means to let go of goal-directed change initiatives. And so that's a good example of something that I sprinkle, or I might say, or engage with somebody in conversation about. I think that takes time. I think that takes time for people to really come to terms with, because that goes a lot deeper than just, how you manage individuals through complex problems, or how you, like do research or narrative inquiry to understand, things that are unfolding. And I definitely don't want this to be misunderstood as like folks have to go through some kind of like consciousness raising experience to get it. Nope, that ain't what I mean. But I think that it is one of the hardest pieces for people to understand, that in truly complex adaptive systems, that causal relationship, what have you, that they can go, oh yeah, linear cause and effect don't really work the same way, la la la. But the implication of that being that you see something in the world that could be better. You want it to be better. You want it to be different. You want to be the Herb Simon style designer who wants to create preferred futures in place of current ones, but doing that in a way that is not direction or, goal oriented, because it can't be, leaves a lot of people kind of like, and so they revert back to ways of working that I just find less compelling. So for anyone listening to this part and you're like, what the fuck is Jen even talking about? Like, find me, let's chat one-on-one. But there is this really meaningful gap right now between people who want to use complexity and system science to achieve desirable change, but are still trying to do it by picking the change and then trying to work with the substrate until it generates the change they want. They don't realize they're literally doing the thing that their own science indicates is not effective. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you get, Dave Snowden's favorite term for the lotus eaters, who are just like, well, you can't. So just kumbaya, Ram Dass it. And I'm like big fan of that world of thinking in the general spiritual human interrelations sense. But when it comes to wanting to create better worlds for other humans, there is still work that you can do. You can stimulate emergence. You know what I mean? I think there is a huge gap right here that people do not understand. I want to have more people in this part of our community who actually embrace and understand what we mean when we say goal-oriented change is not it, but that it isn't just sit back and let whatever's going to be. That's a weird place.
Can you either write that article or can we just find the AI to like grab what you just said and like,
hey chat,
like
listen to this talk and make an article.
You just nailed it.
That's
it's
I'll
one
put it
of
on
those
my list to write about.
Well, mate, if this is the big thing, put it at the top of your list, because I agree wholeheartedly. It's where this work gets corrupted. It's where this work creates burnout, and so it exists on both ends of the spectrum. It's where people get lost. It's where people get. It's where everybody starts. They give up, or it's too ambitious, and so they're not going to bring it in anywhere, or they're not going to turn it over, or I found this thing, and that the thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to fix the whole enterprise, or I'm going to fix the whole community, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And this came up. Somebody had the aha in the warm data session about enacting yesterday, and one of my big observations yesterday was the amount of stuff that we pass around, all those links and videos and my mixtapes and all that kind of stuff that go out, like all the things that people were calling out in the Semathesy at the end of the warm data lab were things that we've spent hours absorbing, but in those kind of sessions, people just kind of go, oh, I bet that you actually have to inhabit these behaviors. You don't just clock in and push something through. Yep, there it is. You take a few days and sit with that. You'll be great. It was perfect. And this is kind of that, how do we habituate and embody some of this sort of stuff? And it's not a judgment, or it's not a character flaw. This is how we've been raised into this world, and how we've gotten gotten paid, how we've been able to feed ourselves since day one. Is show your value, and at the end of the year, what have you accomplished? All that kind of stuff. Well, so it's not weird.
It's also,
but
go ahead.
Well, you also just, what you're talking about is being able to recognize that you've walked through a place, and that's really it. And if you understand just the chaos theory to an extent, as long as the butterfly is flapping its wings, we'll still have hurricanes, and that's fine. That's all we need.
That's that should be our, as long as the butterfly is flapping its wings. But it's also not, and I could forgive someone for mishearing this in the stuff you and I are saying. It's not now an inner development goal that you got to go get good at this. Do you know what I mean? Right. That's what I watch happen, is people kind of walk up to this and they go, this is about, get your mind right and everything follows. And I just think that it's hard for people to find the space between these things that is where you really want to be. And you only do it by being it, to your point about embodying it. And somebody said to us the other day, I kind of feel like what you guys are doing in your community of practice that meets on Fridays is embodying / modeling the very thing that you guys are on about, and you and I are like, you noticed,
That
you
was,
know, like
yeah.
there's a level of that that just continues to go kind of like right. I don't say over people's heads because I don't mean it in that condescending way, but like
Yeah.
it's there's a noticing that needs to accompany the embody or the enacting piece of it that isn't,
Hmm.
just change your mindset and like inner development and all that. It's
Yep.
much more about just doing and being, and letting that be the guide. And I think I don't know, man. That's just hard for people. I mean, Jeff made the point in our last chat too that like people, especially in North America, but I think everywhere in the world, in 2025, don't like using their body.
Hmm.
And I thought that was a really interesting observation that ties into this
Yeah.
because I don't just mean using my body, like moving around, but I think simply enacting and accepting that being is a form of action, and acting on really is like a meaningless concept when you get into this stuff. So it's not acting on. It is like, it's not the Heidegger, like ready, present to hand, ready to hand stuff. No, okay, we'll come back to that
Yeah.
another time. But
No,
like, it's not like I've got
I'm
the
not
hammer in my
intimately
hand.
familiar.
I'm the
Hmm.
hammer.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So like,
Yes.
be the instrument,
Yeah.
enact it as you're the instrument. You're not Knevin's not the instrument. The Knevin framework and estrogen mapping aren't the instrument. You know,
Hmm.
modeling isn't the instrument. Like you're the fucking instrument. You're it. Be it.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
We might be getting close to a good place to stop too, because I got to run shortly. But
Okay. Yeah.
as long as the
I.
butterfly keeps flapping its wings, be the instrument. That's our headline for today. That'll be our AI generated summary.
Perfect. I I last think this because the warm data lab is still on my
Mm,
mind because
yeah.
this was a great experience. And if you haven't tried a warm data lab for our viewers,
Yes.
try it.
Highly recommend.
People need people. Look them up. Check out Nora Bateson's work. But
Yeah.
um, we were talking afterwards. The signal that we sort of got from the community. Um, the signal wasn't the ahas. The signal wasn't that like people are now going to go out and throw a trash can through a window and they're not going to go vote differently necessarily. It was just the presence. People came and were the attractor was there and the participation was there. They were there for the entire time. That was the signal that said there's something here that will create another one. And in that X one, we'll have different people come through. And so it'll be a different event of different ideas at a different venue, and some of the same. And then we'll figure out if there will be another one from that. And that's so much of what this work is. It's to notice those, I don't want to say small things at all, because there's nothing small about that.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff that doesn't register in the ways that we've been trained for things to register.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think this chat as a whole, has really, today's chat really wasn't necessarily anchored in Monday to Friday. I work as part of an agile unit, and we're in
Mm-hmm.
sprint 3 of this, and my Jira story points on this thing aren't accurate. Like, how do I enact complexity methods in like, an agile, whatever kind of environment? So it strikes me though, as I'm thinking back about everything we just talked through, though it was at a little bit of a more maybe philosophical level, I cannot stress enough how, to me, this is the more meaningful stuff. Like the how to is to think about this. Think about why the hell you even care as an individual. Like when you arrived in a community that felt, whether it's complexity or systems or futures or design or whatever your tribe is, when you arrived in this intellectual community and it felt like something, whether it rhymed with things you already knew or whether it was mind-blowing in and of itself, you felt belonging you'd never felt before, or you felt intellectually stimulated in ways you'd never felt before. Like whatever it is about that community, what you're taking away from the interactions in that community is now the stuff that you can just go be in your day job. It doesn't mean use the right tools or the frameworks, expect the work to change. But like everything you just said, especially at the end, go be the embodiment of what this
Mm-hmm.
community is doing for you. Just go be it in your
Participate.
mundane 9 to 5. Ain't no one gonna get it. Just go be it. We're so close to being like, be the change, but that just go be it. Just be it. We should totally pull up like an Alan Watts or a Ram Dass clip for the ending. Anyway,
Let's do it.
on that note,
Yeah.
anything else you want to,
Let's
do you
close.
want a last word or shall we?
Do I need a last word here? I'm going to leave a cliffhanger. How about that? Because I want to know when, because we can't just say, go change your mindset. But there had to have been a moment for both of us, and I want to think about this too, when we had a moment of reflection and said, this isn't a time that I came in and changed the environment, where I just did a thing and it shifted. But I noticed that I was there and I was a participant in how it's different now. And I'm comfortable with that. Something taught us that we're okay with that, not the way that we've been told and pressured over the decades to do it differently.
Yeah.
We had to have done something, has reinforced the alternative in a way strong enough to resist all the other, forces. So curious to what that is.
Put that on
Let's leave that cliffhanger.
Yeah, we'll start with that next time. I love it.
Love it.
All right.
Cliffhanger.
Fabulous.
Da, da, da. We need bad music. All right.
Perfect.